Greetings and welcome. My name is Aaron Craig with Redmade Creative, and what I'm going to show you today is a project that I actually hope you're going to take and tinker with and extend. So I've been building this project, and I'll show it to you as I talk, that is basically an interactive platformer. And what that means is all of the abilities of the player, the design of the level, everything here is actually available for you to tinker with live inside of the game to kind of get a feel of what different settings feel like on the fly. Now, I'm going to be using this as a tool to teach some of my students about game development, and they'll be able to actually design and kind of make their own game without having to know how to code. But I also want to extend this further, and I wanted to show it off. So right now we have a fully working platformer with double jump, we have wall grabs, we've got collisions, we've got enemies that we can collide with, we have the ability to get hurt. If I come up here, this little piggy can hit me, or I guess this one can. If he hits me, he's got a charged state. You can actually hit him and take him out as well, and all of that works great, which that's nothing too impressive. What I think is really cool is when you open up the settings, right? So here is the entirety of how this platformer works. And if you noticed, the movement in this is acceleration based. But if you don't want to use acceleration, you don't have to by any means. So you can just toggle acceleration completely on and off. If you want to change your max speed to something ludicrous, you totally can, which a lot of these settings can absolutely break this game, right? If we change acceleration back to on, we still start really slow, but we can do that. If we move acceleration up, well, then it becomes really hard to actually control yourself. But you could make an entire game of something like this because you can continue to alter these settings, and I'll move them back here to much slower. You can add in your jumps, so you can have as many jumps as you want to have. Well, up to 10. I limit a little bit. You can change your fall speed, so you can make it so you fall really fast, and you can make it so that the gravity hits you really hard too, so then you can barely jump at all. Oh, whoops, I'm also doing something over here I haven't talked about yet. You can change all of those settings, how much you jump, all of that stuff. So if I put the gravity down and the jump height up, it kind of becomes almost like a Flappy Birds game where you can jump and move and float in between, which is kind of fun. You can actually change the camera itself, so if you want to see more of the room, you can adjust each one of these. And you can also change the ledge grabbing if you want that. And I'll see if I can bring this up to a not terrible ratio. You can also change the costumes of your character on the fly as well. So I'm going to reset this, and the second page is where I spent a lot more time, I think. So we can actually design a level inside of the level itself. Now, what that means is I can select as many of these as I want. I can come in here and I can actually place these down with a click, and they become a full tile that I can actually collide with and interact with. That also means I can come in here and I can delete tiles. Now, this guy clearly has no collisions or gravity. That guy, well, I just deleted him because you can delete enemies, because you can also come in here and you can put down enemies. And that means that you can design your own level exactly the way you want it to go on the fly, which to me, I think is pretty cool. So now we have this idea where, well, we can actually kind of do whatever we want, however we want, because we can actually do it on the fly. Woo! And if you die, you can reset. So we have enemies. We've got some spikes you can throw down for traps, and those spikes are going to hurt you. Now, we can't die, which is nice, I think. Well, maybe it's nice, maybe it's not. But we can't die, but we do have all of these options inside of here. And I'm hoping to just put this out. It's available, the source code's on my GitHub. I'll link it down in the comments below. But I want you to continue to extend this project. And if you want to just play around with it and tinker and just make your own game with it, go for it. But if you know how to fork on GitHub, I would love to see what you can make out there, because I want to keep adding more stuff inside of here. The sprites and everything I got from here, there's a lot more enemies, there's a lot more stuff you can do, but let me show you kind of the breakdown of this project so that if you take it and extend it, you'll kind of know how to continue coding in the style I've already got here, okay? So here's the player object, and I'm going to open these up. I will say, I don't know if it's on any other person's device, but I cannot use the new code editor inside of here. It comes up with an error, and then Feather completely stops working, which means that there's no autocomplete, no recognition of any kind when you type, which is why I'm on the old code editor and not the new one, which I actually prefer. So I've got all of my stuff broken down, pretty well obviously named, I think, with comments here and there. You've got your 4 different players. I have an enum for the different states that we can be in, and then we go through and we have all of the different sprites for them. And the thing that is probably going to be the most confusing, which also gives the most flexibility and power to add more states and power-ups and abilities and all of these different things, is my state, my state machine that I've got right here. So in the scripts, you'll see this state machine right here. And what this is doing is it is actually a constructor that creates a state, and there are several functions inside of this state. And each one of these runs at a different place, and when you make your own, you need to define each one of them. It will give you a message if you don't, but you define each one of them, and then you can just move between those states. So when I'm looking at my player, my create event is actually where almost all of my code lives. And so I have this whole section here. Let's look at idle really quick. I make idle a new state by creating it like this. I give it a name, and I give the state that it's in, which is used for in the drawing of what sprite to draw. Okay. Then I have the on enter, and I create a new one. I override the default function. So when I'm in my idle state, I enter it and I do that. It only happens one time. Then when I exit, I do this. Right now, I don't do anything specific. The core loop is what happens and how you can actually accept input and do all this stuff. So anything that's supposed to happen in idle happens here. So in this case, I have if we are using acceleration, then we decelerate. Otherwise, we stop moving while we're in idle. And then we check for collisions, because if we are decelerating, that means that we could run into something even while we're idle. And we have all the ways that we can move here, and so on. And then we have drawing here. We have a draw GUI and just a regular draw. And if we look at the draw event, it's really straightforward. It's just setting the sprite index and then calling the draw myself from my state. So in the step event, we have the player input and then these 2 calls from the current state that we're in. So the step, the draw, all of that stuff is actually really straightforward. All of the code you're doing actually is inside of this create event. So currently we have an idle state, a running state, jumping, which is split up into 3 so that we can ledge grab and fall and check for gravity at different points and stuff. Then we have our ledge grabbing, double jump, which you could rename to just extra jump state, which I actually think I named it extra jump somewhere. Yeah, right there, because we can do up to 10 right now. We have a hurt state. And then if you want to extend it, I have this one right here. It's called Replace Me. So what I do is I just copy, so I have another version of it. But then if you just do Control F, find and replace. So find every version of Replace Me. And if we want to do a death state, I just click right here. And then this is the whole new death state. Everything's already set up pretty much right there, which is a nice quick way to add a whole new state. And then I just set whatever state we're in right here. Now, there's a lot of code here, 600 lines, but a lot of it is very straightforward. The beautiful thing about this state machine is if anything goes wrong, you'll know what state you're in and you'll know exactly where to look. So if you're not transitioning from the running state to the jumping state, then you know in run, in the state changer, something is wrong with this small chunk of code right here that you're trying to jump. That's it. You don't have to go anywhere else because you know it's right there. So this, in my opinion, is a fantastic, an extendable state machine, which is what I'm currently using in my larger personal game project. But I've put it here because it allows you to add more stuff into here. And if we look at the enemies, we have a very similar system, actually the same system right here. So we set their health, we set how fast they can go and all of that stuff. And then they move into these states that we have here. And they've got idle, walk, charge, hurt 1, hurt 2, which is a different animation, and then they're dead. And so, just like the player, you set these states up, you initialize them in the create event, and then you're basically good to go. So we can add more enemies really easily. Now, the cool thing that I was able to set up here was the level editor itself. So let's see if we come in here to the level editor and I open these up. There's a lot going on inside of the level editor. As you can probably imagine, being able to actually edit tiles takes a little bit of work. Now, I'll try to explain the best I can. If you want to extend this system, you should definitely know what you're doing with tiles. You should definitely have a lot of experience with GameMaker under your belt, but you can. You can absolutely add more tile sets in here, and you can change up how it works. So, what's happening here is I am getting a tile when I click on it, and I am using a snapping system so that I only select what is there and what's available. So what that actually looks like is when I click, that's my current one, and I can extend it, and then you can only grab in the 16 by 16 section, and then you can draw as much of that as you want. So you could take the entirety of this and draw it all at once. Would be kind of weird. I've got some things in there to make sure you can't select up and over too much. It does still do some weird things here and there, but for the most part it works. The only annoying thing is when you go back. So selecting from down going backwards, it does not work properly. So keep that in mind. That's the only thing that's kind of broken, is going backwards. I just could not get to work, and it was not worth the time in my opinion. So we have everything there working though. So we choose and we figure out where we are selecting. So most of this happens in the step event, which is fairly well labeled. So we're using the X and Y, and we're also using the mouse GUI, because if we come over to our room, you'll actually see we have 3 different UI layers here. One for the controls up here, one for the enemy options, which is currently disabled, but if I enable that view, that's our enemy option. And then we also have our control, where's that at? Options, oh, options are over here, yeah. So we have the options and we have the enemies. I'm pretty sure we need one of those to be alive. No, we don't. So if we open settings here, we'll have to press it twice because it does something weird. That's why I typically keep one of them open so that it works. But otherwise, I'm using these UI layers. You don't really need to understand how they work unless you want to change where something is at. But for the most part, this is all set up through UI, so you can add more things inside of here. You can change that, which is really handy. This UI system, it's not my favorite, but it actually works really nicely for creating a grid system like this. Now, if you want to add more abilities to the player, or you want to add a system where you can alter the variables of the enemies, this is how I did it, okay? So we have that whole state machine, we have the ability to select tiles, the level editor here is how you're going to do that, so you can do it all with your mouse here, and it tells you exactly what's happening. I do try to comment quite a bit, so you can find exactly what you're looking for. If you want to extend more variables so that you can alter them while the game is running, there is a OBJ slide bar, and this is where you would do that at. So, you're actually going to add quite a few variable definitions down here, and this is how you actually extend it. So, you need to have one for the object that you're connecting to, so you can... Right now they're all set to the player, but if you wanted to change an enemy behavior, you could have an entire subset just for the pig, and you could add them more abilities and be able to enable and disable states, which would be pretty interesting. You have the object, you have the variable that you're actually going to connect to, you have the minimum and maximum value, whether you want that to be rounded, so sometimes you do, like for the jumps, I don't want them to have 6.2 jumps, so round that up, and then what you actually want it to display in a friendly way, because the variable name might not be the most friendly. So in the room itself, if I click on one of these, we go to variables, and you can see here you have to actually select the object itself. The name of the variable goes here, the minimum, maximum value, stuff like that. In this case, I clicked on the jumping one, and so I do want to round those values. And then that's really about it. So you can add more of them inside of here. So this is the Y movement, which is why I labeled it so jumping. So if I wanted to come in, I could add another slide bar into Y movement if you came up with another one. And you can see here, it actually immediately puts one up here. Now, you can extend this to make it taller if you want to by changing the Y movement options to maybe be like 125. Oop, that's wide. To maybe be, let's go to height. This might totally break everything. Yeah, we're not going to worry too much about that. I'm getting used to this whole system that we've got here, but at the same time, it's a lot going on here. So you can extend all of it. You just have to figure out how to extend the graphic, extend the section, and all that. But you can add more variables. You can change up what each one of these does, and you can make an entirely new UI layer here for each enemy or each state that you want to alter. If you want to get into nitty-grittiness like that, you totally can. So the slider bars themselves will actually create their handle, and it's using this function called map, which allows you to just put in, let's see, I think it's inside of here. Yeah. So this function called map, which all it's doing, well, I guess it's doing quite a bit, it is maps a value from one range to another, which means that when I'm looking at my slide bar for jumping, okay, not my creation code, I'm going between 0 and 10. Now, the actual value that is changing when you do this is the slide bar itself. And so if I look at my jumps, I'm going from this X coordinate all the way up to this X coordinate. And so what this map function does is it gets your minimum value, which is from over here, so 0 and 10, and then it basically converts those 0 to 10 from these right here. So my box left and my box right. And so when you slide it, it converts the actual X coordinate, which is not 0 to 10, because that's 10 pixels and wouldn't be moving much. It actually converts it into 0 to 10 in a nice, smooth way. And that's what map is doing. That's where it's all over the place inside of here. You're going to see clamping, you're going to see maps, you're going to see all those things around here. But for the most part, once you start playing around with it, it'll help to understand it. But if you already know how LERP, or linear interpretation, works, then mapping is just kind of the next evolution that gives you even more control over something like that. And so that's about it. I'm really happy with this project. I might add more onto it. But for the most part, I think this is really cool. I love being able to drag and drop enemies in here, being able to actually come in here and design your own level. I think is really fun, really cool. And if I get this, or you get this to a larger chunk, a larger, more fleshed out project, then this could be a really great introduction to game design or level design, especially for younger students or people who don't have a lot of experience. Being able to just open this game and start playing and designing, that I think is really powerful and really cool. So I hope you'll enjoy this. I want to see what you're gonna make. Please show me what you work on and how you extend it. I'm throwing this out there. It is up and ready to go. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you make. And that's it. A lot of rambling, but hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you're gonna go do something with it. I'm really excited. So that's what I've got for you. Thanks for joining me. As always, keep making, keep learning, and I'll talk to you later.